our classes. So today, our topic is quality management. And I know that a lot of us will be thinking about quality in very many ways, but it will be a great lesson for everyone, so that we just have to start rethinking and reassessing how we have appraised ourselves, the quality of our services over time, and begin to think about what the real indicators of service quality is. In facility management, unlike tangible products, we provide intangibles, in products or services that experience, but they can't really hold, they can't really describe in tangible terms. If we can talk about quality for tangibles, we should also be able to talk about quality for intangibles. So today we're going to be looking at quality and how it affects the service industry generally, and how we as facility managers can apply it in our operations and in our services. What does quality mean to a facility manager? It could mean all kinds of indicators, could mean all kinds of features, easier availability, user friendliness, aesthetic appeal, nice features, proven reliability, lower cost. Think about that again. Lower cost can be a strong indicator of quality for the FM industry. Good after sales services, manifest durability, simple maintainability, perceived value. So in the service industry, perception is a big deal. What people see as value from Mr. A to Mr. B will be different. So it's important that we understand that uniqueness of definition of value for people in the built environment, so that we don't end up expecting that service quality
Mr. Paul, you are muted.
Yes, sorry about that. Let's look at the definition of quality as it affects facility management and the service industry generally. And this definition has a series of keywords that you need to pay attention to. Quality is the process of confirming customer expectations, establishing performance standards and metrics based on those expectations, measuring the degree to which current products and services meet the standards and metrics, and identifying and implementing improvements to satisfy the standards and metrics. So let's break this down so that we can see the various components of service quality as it relates to facility management. The first aspect of service quality is the process of confirming customer expectations. Confirming customer expectations simply means being able to hear, listen from the customer what his service level expectation will be, what the specification of his services will be is going to be defined by us eventually, but we need to hear what are the metrics by which we can measure the customer's attainment of those service levels. So in essence, if somebody says provide electricity for me in my office, for example, now that may look or sound straightforward, but it is naive to think that that is straightforward, provide electricity. For that, there are series and series of questions you need to ask to understand what the customer is saying and to confirm to the customer what you understand him or her to be saying. If my office, if you don't know what I'm doing in my office, you don't know whether it's a consulting room for a medical institution, or you don't know whether it's a theater for operations, you don't know whether it's a classroom, you don't know whether it's a private office where I sit to work, you'd have already made the first missed opportunity. The process of confirming customer expectations would have missed that first. Secondly, what am I going to be doing with electricity in my space? Am I using lights? Am I using certain sensitive equipment? Am I using devices that have storage and so on and so forth? I need to understand. You need to understand what the customer wants to do with electricity in that space. You know the kind of equipment the person has for which he's going to be using that electricity. So in essence, for you to confirm my expectations, you need to know what I want to achieve from the service I'm demanding from you. You need to know what I'm going to do with the service I'm demanding from you. You need to also know what I have as my constraints, which is very key. For example, I could have certain equipment that cannot stand fluctuations. I could have certain processes that when they are being performed, I'm not only talking of avoiding spikes and fluctuations, I'm also talking about it can't go off. For example, you can't have a changeover of 3 minutes in between. I don't have a backup. I don't have any kind of system where I have something that I can use to store for an intermittent period. So you need to understand exactly in details. So how do you confirm customer expectations? One, you ask questions, specific questions that will give you information about what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to use your service for, and what kind of constraints I'm going through. Then you move on to the next level of service quality definition, establishing performance standards based on those expectations. Now, this is a huge aspect of defining quality. I need to use certain standards and metrics to establish performance standards. What this simply means is that I need to identify the kind of things that can be measured to show that I am meeting your requirements. Take the expectation of no fluctuations, no downtime, zero fluctuations, zero downtime, for example. Or take the expectation of no surges and no spikes. There'll have to be a steady supply because I have equipment that cannot be obstructed or that can be easily frustrated, a process that can be easily frustrated, right? Now, if I don't have a means of measuring what I'm providing, for example, voltage between the range of 200 and 220 is suitable for my use. You have to be the one to define that. You can't just say I've provided current, I've provided power, and so you now have power to run your equipment. If that equipment cannot take surges, cannot take spikes, cannot take downtime, for example, then I have to put metrics in place. For example, I need to know changeover time cannot be more than 3 minutes. And if it's going to be less than 1 minute, that means I can't even have a changeover. I have to have an automatic changing system, or I have to have a backup, a UPS or an inverter that handles the changeover mechanism. That's because I understand. So now I'm putting metrics in place to ensure that what the customer expects, those metrics are what measures how I comply to what the customer expects. If I don't have them in place, then I'm not doing good work. Okay. So for example, you could take something as simple as cleaning, right? How do you measure that you're actually meeting the customer expectations when it comes to cleaning? Customers' concern probably is dust, children becoming ill and having chest congestion because of dust and dirt in their environment, right? I'm asking myself, how can I measure the amount of dust that will still be in the air or that has been removed from the air when I clean? If it's cooling must be available. What kind of availability measures? When cooling goes off, when power goes off, how long did it stay off for? Those are the kind of things I'm talking about. You have to have ways of measuring. So if I understand, I'm interpreting what I understand by using measurable ideas, measurable numbers, objective means of actually staying within ranges. So I now get back to the customer to say, I understand that your equipment will not does not do well with fluctuations. What about if the fluctuation stays between this range and this range? Or so you look at that, you look at the specifications of that service. So you measure, you put down those metrics. And this applies to both services, all kinds of services, both hard and soft services. Then, because you now have those metrics in place, The third angle to quality is that you must have a means of measuring the degree to which your current products and services meet those standards and metrics. In essence, if you are providing a service, haven't defined the service expectations of that customer, what you are basically now doing is ensuring that based on those metrics that you are providing to the customer, you can now measure how you are meeting those requirements. Because if you are not able to measure how you are meeting those requirements, there is no quality service. You really can't tell that you're providing good or bad service. And without quality service, there's nothing like improvement. And we're going to look at that as we go on. So how do you measure? What do you report on? All right, so this is where things like key performance indicators and service level agreements that we're going to be talking about in this class will come in. You have to set certain things down to say, these are the service level agreement or service level expectations based on this specification of work that I understand the customer wants. And because I understand the scope of work, the specification of the work, these are the ways I will measure that I'm complying with those specifications and I'm meeting the customer's scope. And then I'll now have a reporting mechanism that helps me tally how I am doing, so I can be able to have a record of how I'm doing on an ongoing basis. That's where this third part, measuring the degree to which current products and services meet the standards and expectations. And because you are measuring, you're moving into the fourth angle or the fourth aspect of quality management right now, which is identifying and implementing improvements to satisfy the standards and metrics. So in essence, your continuous measurement and continuous reporting and continuous checking on and tracking and trending your progress on how you are meeting or how you are not meeting helps you get objective data with which you are going to put together improvement mechanisms to ensure that you always meet the customer's standards and metrics. So if you understand quality, you'll never ever tell yourself or ask yourself, are we doing well? Are we not doing well? No, it's not a matter of doing well or not doing well. It's not about poor service or good service. Every service will have ways of measuring it. You're not doing well or you are doing well will be because you have data, standards and metrics you are measuring against. For example, how many reworks? For example, how long did it take for, how many times did power go out? How many times did we have to stay without cooling in this space? And how many minutes did it last? How often did we have fluctuations, and how many times did those fluctuations cause damage to equipment? You have to have a way of tracking and counting, because if you have those numbers, you're continuously closing the gap. The customer expects A. Because you are measuring and reporting, you are knowing whether you are actually at A or you are at B or you are at C. And because you know that gap is always being established continuously. If that gap continues to be established, what you are going to have is that you are thinking about how I'm going to close that gap. So a quick recap: quality, 1, confirm customer expectations. 2, establish performance standards and metrics based on those expectations, which means the metrics, the things you measure must align with the customer expectations. You can't be measuring and counting something else that does not align with what the customer expects, okay? And then once you have established those performance standards, that means you understand the customer, you have documented what the customer wants. And then number 3, as you provide the services, you are measuring metrics and standards so that you can see whether you are meeting those standards you established in step 2. And if you are not, you go to step 4, which means putting together programs for improvements and closing the gap so that you are always meeting the customer expectation. So those are the 4 angles or 4 steps or 4 layers or 4 levels of quality management, and you must understand each of them. This is not something that you hear every day. This is not something you hear even very experienced facility managers talking about, because they don't know. They don't know. Everybody just says, and you can see this easily in some checklists. You see some FM checklists. They'll say inspection checklist, lobby area, good or bad. Okay. You see some writing reports to say remark, okay. I see all those things and I just laugh. It means that they don't understand, they don't have a clue how to measure service quality, because if you want to measure service quality, there must be specific standards and metrics that you are measuring against. So if I go into a toilet and I want to be sure that the toilet is meeting the customer expectations, I'll ask questions like, is there tissue? insufficient supply? Is there air freshener? Is the place smelling? Not necessarily air freshener. I don't need air freshener in toilet. Is it smelling or not smelling? Is the place dry? Those are the things I have done as part of confirming customer expectation. They want the place to be free of stains. They want the place to be free of smells. They want supplies to always be in place. They want, and they've given me all of those. So if I am going to measure my performance, I'll keep reporting on how often somebody can enter there and see those things and see that those things are aligning. If it's not aligning, and once in a while I go into the toilet, oh, there's no tissue there. What happened? Somebody took the tissue and put it in his bag. And I'll go back to my team, sit down. What do we do to ensure that tissue is always in the toilet? Because the customer expects tissue to always be in the toilet. Now you have a challenge, right? Now the challenge is I put tissue at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and then somebody has removed it in the next hour. What do I do? How do I handle it, right? So I'll give you a quick story. Yesterday I took the train ride from Ibadan to Lagos, and on the ride, I went on the train from Lagos to Ibadan on Monday and came back on Tuesday. And on the ride, I noticed something. The wash hand basins that were in the open, that were in the corridors, had soap. The wash hand basins that were inside the toilets, they don't have soap. After checking one when going and checking another one when coming, I have to ask one of the staff in the carriage, why don't we have soap in there? Oh, he said there's soap in this outer one. I said, well, you don't expect me to use the toilet and then come outside to wash my hands. After all, there's a tap in there. He said people put the hand wash soap into their bag when they use the toilet, and then they walk out with it. So you put it in there and you don't see it in next minute. That's a big challenge now. But their answer to it is not not in the line of service quality, because if they were to work in the line of service quality, they don't think about how do we keep the soap in there so that we ensure that it stays there. Okay, there are certain fittings that you fit on a wall that you have a key to open and put soap into it, right? That people go in there, they can only press. There was one, somebody actually told me, oh, I put soap into that thing and people press everything out. I said, if anybody has a means and the patience to press 100 times to bring out all the soap I have inside there, your job is to make sure you refill it. That's why your quality expects that you go back there every hour to check. If they can come back in there and spend 30 minutes pressing all this soap out of that container, fill it again. Because at the end of the day, you must find solutions to obstacles so you can continue to meet customer expectations. So those improvements, those changes to overcome challenges and to continue to meet the expectations of the customer is your job. You cannot say, I'm managing quality and I cannot deliver to meet the expectation of the customer. So this is the foundation of quality. Everything else we are going to talk about today is going to be hinged around how you can achieve these 4 things. Okay, so please pay attention. So when we manage facilities, the customer feels you have a good quality facility when the place is clean. Very easy. When it looks well maintained, things are not peeling and breaking and cracking, right? Work processes that are aligned with strategic directions, where you are not working at cross purposes against your management. The balance sheet is also healthy, which means you are not overspending, you're not underspending. The team that you put in place to work, they are empowered, they are committed, and they want to work. They are striving for excellence. They have this zest to work. They have a concern for the users that you have in the facility. And then you have auditing and monitoring systems for assessing performance. You have tools in place, because let me tell you the truth. You are not working in a quality environment or doing anything about quality if you don't have a way of staying on track. Every human by nature is wayward. If you give anybody the chance to become free as they like, the quality will dwindle over time. All right, so even if you have the best, most disciplined person, you must have tools in place to ensure that people keep doing what they're doing, and they can track and they can monitor and they can improve on what they are doing. And the last item that's very key to quality management is compliance. You must be able to adhere to compliance requirements of statutory regulations. You know, whenever we talk about the building code, there'll be a class on the building code. You are going to have a whole class on the building regulations because it's key for facility managers to understand the implications of complying with laws and regulations. The laws and regulations actually prescribe what we call the minimum standards. Minimum standards. At that minimum, you are not breaking the law. But minimum standard is not where you should be operating at. You're supposed to operate at personal professional standard, corporate standard, higher standards, client standard. Standard should be higher than minimum. Now, so when I teach about quality in service delivery in facility management, I'm talking about operating at levels above minimum standards, having your own unique standards. Your standards cannot be below minimum. Below minimum is breaking the law. You are doing things that is against the law and it's not acceptable. Okay, so that's the whole idea of quality. You are working above minimum. You are working above compliance. Where does it start? It starts with me. It starts. So quality is not something that people go into some organization and say, "Oh, this place is the system is this, system is that." There's no quality here. There's this. We badmouth systems around us, but quality actually starts with us as individuals. The determination to get it right the first time, to ensure that whatever I do, I put a full focus on getting it right the first time. Okay, service quality means that I'm able to use resources efficiently by doing things right the first time. And by doing so, and to do so, I must pay attention to details. I cannot scope work shabbily and come back to say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to add certain glues and certain gaskets. Or I cannot finish doing the job that I've done in an area and say, oh, cleaning is not my job. Let cleaners come and do their job when I'm the one that created the mess, for example. Or you're painting and you see a speck, a drop, and you think, oh, this is just a speck, or this is just a drop of paint. It's not significant. It's not a big deal. No, you pay attention to details, and then your focus on the customer is untiring. Customer. And you know, when we define quality, we define quality in terms of starting with the customer and ending with the customer. In fact, if there's a word that you can use to replace service quality or FM quality, it is about customer. It's all about customer. Improve customer satisfaction. You save money and you save time. And quality is to do things right. That's what we said, right? What is right then? The customer defines what, defines how, defines when, defines where they need your service. So that's the first and overarching understanding you must have. The customer defines what is right. You as a facility manager, you may know a lot. You may be an expert in your field, but you cannot define quality for your customer. Your customer defines his quality. Now, the other angle to quality is right as defined by standards, best practices, and regulatory standards or compliance. So I talked about standards at different levels, right? So all standards, starting from the minimum standard, which is regulatory compliance or the building code compliance, all the way to professional standards, corporate standards, individual standards, whatever standard you set for yourself. Now, you set these standards and you ensure that you are explaining them, because all these standards, the only standard that you cannot subordinate to the customer, the only standard that can become superior to customers' definition of standard is regulatory compliance. How do I explain this? If a customer wants a toilet, and you have looked around and you provided specification options for the customer, and the customer says, no, I like the bend down one, right? Okay, that's fine. You go about looking for the bend down one. He says, no, I like the one that you dig a hole and you just put some board over it, and that's the one, so that the smell can be coming out in the afternoon and stuff like that. That's where you say, okay, no, sir, no, ma. The law of the land prohibits open defecation. I cannot provide a toilet below the standards defined by the law. And law specifies that the minimum standards for toilets is that there must be a separation, there must be a barrier between the storage or dump and where people actually have access to. And that's why you see, even though there are piping between the dump and where the toilet itself is, there is also a water barrier, right? There's always a barrier that helps to, seal off the connection with that dump. And that is because of health and safety consideration, right? So that is the minimum standard. A customer cannot prescribe anything for you to do or expect you to do anything below the standard. So if you don't understand that minimum standard, then you might listen to this lesson and say, oh, I must comply to the customer's expectation and customer standards, and try to apply yourself to deliver services below the standard, thereby contravening the law and get yourself into trouble, right? So that's the point where you say, no, all the options available to the customers are supposed to be above. Now, if you have ideas, fantastic ideas, you understand these customers very well, and you think that something you want to do will help them excel, will help them, gain the kind of results they are trying to gain. Your job is not to impose it on them. Your job is to break it down, give them additional options with enough information to understand the pros and cons and the risk attached to each of those options. But once a customer decides this is the path I want to take, for example, you may be prescribing a particular type of service that costs maybe =1 million once, and once they provide that =1 million, they won't need to provide it again for the next 5 years. You might think, oh, this is very good quality because it's very durable, it gives value, and so on and so forth, right? And then there are other options. There's the one of 150,000 naira that every year you need to be refreshing and doing a new thing. And you have explained to the customer, this is cheaper, but it's going to be every year. So the pros and cons I explained, the deficiency in this option is there, the risk and all is explained. The customer says, you know what, I prefer option 2. Now, the customer's reasoning is pretty straightforward. First, I save 850 between this year and next year. So there's a likelihood that by the time I'm paying the next 150 next year, my 850 have yielded more than 150. So I will not even be spending money again for the every year replacement. So that was the first financial consideration of the customer. And then you're thinking of this thing is very durable. If you use it, you'll get so much. Customer is also thinking, well, why would I want to use one service or one result for 5 years? Why can't I get a fresh one? Maybe next year I'll prefer green. Maybe the year after I'll prefer purple, and so on and so forth, right? It looks new all the time. So in your mind, you think this is going to be quality, but the customer has told you what quality means to him. 150K per year, and that's what you will do. And you will do it with full heart, good mind, good service, good delivery, and always following up to ensure that the replacement is done as at when due, because this is the plan that you have put in place with the customer. It becomes your own plan. Okay? So that's the whole idea. You don't subject a customer to your opinions. It's only an opinion. You are not the definer of quality. Don't try to define quality. Explain, break down, specify pros and cons and risk of all options. Let the customer decide what he wants. Because at the end of the day, quality is perceptual, which means it is the person's impression of it that matters. And that's why what works for Mr. A will not necessarily be what Mr. B needs. Conditional and somewhat subjective. This is very key. It's subjective. Many customers will feel one way, and another customer will come in and say, I don't feel that way. That customer is not wrong. Get that into your head now. It's not wrong. Customer is right in his assessment of what he needs, in his perception of what he thinks is good for him. You may think you understand the customer better than himself. You are lying to yourself. So get it right principle starts with you. You have to take personal accountability, continually do self-evaluation and reality check, have a passionate desire to learn and improve. And like we said, the focus should always be on the customer. But improvement will always follow the discovery and application of laws, principles, and best known practices that govern the outcome of a specific endeavor. In essence, you can get better by learning what works for others. The universal law of cause and effect determines all process improvement outcomes. Now, this is the universal law of cause and effect. Only by improving the inputs to a process can you influence the output or results. Everything we do, we form a system. There is an input, there's a process, and there's an output for every step in a system. So if I am a technician, when I put oil into my gen, I check it, I record the readings, I record temperature and water level and all of those things, and I keep recording them, right? Now, what I'm doing in essence is I'm taking data, I am interpreting those data as a process, I'm writing reports as outputs, which is going to go to my supervisor. My supervisor is going to get those reports and add them into his own reports, right? Now, my supervisor needs to be sure that the data I provide for my operations are accurate. Otherwise, his whole report will end up being wrong. So he's not supposed to focus only on what he does, but he must keep thinking about how to improve the data processes and how to analyze those data technician. In essence, you are thinking about the other man's output. Now, why am I thinking about the other man's output? Because his output is going to become my input. And if my input is faulty, there's nothing I do in my process that will make my output better. My output will be bad. Okay? So because I want to keep focusing on improving the inputs to my process so that my output can be good, I need to watch out for whoever is producing the output that is becoming my input. That's the universal law of cause and effect. Improvement is a result of painstaking preparation, documented goals and procedures, measured performance, and persistent learning. So continue this get it right principles. Standardizing tasks gives rise to improved processes. If you have Abu and John in your site providing AC maintenance back to back, and customers start saying, I prefer Abu whenever John is around, no, you shouldn't come to my place. Do you think it's either Abu or John that is right or wrong, or good or bad? No, it is the supervisor or manager that is bad. Because if you begin to, before Abu and John begin to do the work, it's you that made a promise to the customer that we will service your AC according to these service specifications, scope of work, and service levels. That's what we promise the customer. The customer is beginning to see that one of your staff does meet the SLA or specification, and the other one does not. I begin to say, no, I prefer this staff. You are the one failing. The one that is actually meeting the service specification is doing it as his own will, not because you put standards in place. So your job from understanding quality is to translate that customer expectation into a set of processes that when John comes, he follows the process, step 1, step 2, step 3, and does the same thing as what Abu does, step 1, step 2, step 3, when Abu is around. Customers will not know the difference between what Abu does and what John does. That is exactly what it means to standardize your task. The same way each person works. Now, if there's a need to change that way of working, we have a roundtable on it. We make that improvement, we do that change, and we rewrite our process or procedure. And everybody gets a copy again to start working with. That's exactly how to standardize tasks. To improve the performance of any activity, you must increase the frequency of feedback to those engaged in the activity. The more frequent the feedback, the better the result. Don't wait for things to go so bad. Give people long rope, like I used to hear. I think I was given enough chance to see if it will change or if it will improve. You're lying to yourself. You don't do that when it comes to work. Because at the end of the day, if any of your subordinates or your staff or your colleagues or your partners or your contractors fails, you have failed. So why would you give the feedback at the point when you see the slightest deviation is beginning to happen? In fact, when you see that slight deviation, you correct, you study the course. There's a higher tendency that the final output will not be so far removed from expectations. So feedback, continuous feedback. And the way you can provide feedback as a facility manager is you must ensure that you have your eyes in the field. Management by walking around. You must be around the people you are serving. You must be around the people who are working for you and your partners in the field, because that is the only time you can catch things that are deviating off course, that you can steady back and you can get things right. So feedback, frequent feedback. Thomas Munson says, when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported, the rate of improvement accelerates. Still in the previous slides. What Thomas Munson is saying basically in this instruction or this lesson is you cannot be working and not be measuring. Back again to the first definition of quality. And that's why I tell FMs, if you're in a job that does not require you to put reports down, that does not have a tracking mechanism for your activities, your efforts, and your results, that job is useless. You better leave that job and go and find a job, because that job will make you stagnated. You won't gain a single experience and you'll be useless at the end of the day. That's why I see many people work for 15 years and end up useless. When they lose the job, they can't find another one, because there is no way you can work for so many years and not have a reporting mechanism and tell me you have been doing well. There's no proof of that doing well. So that's why the first thing is ensure that you have what you are measuring. What you are measuring, again, must be trending, must be trendable or trackable to align with what the customer expects. And you must also ensure that what you are tracking is valuable. Don't go and be counting and measuring things that don't add value to the customer. And then reporting it. What reporting does is that it puts if you're the only one measuring and you're writing down your record, last week I did this. Last 2 weeks on this line item, I did this. Last 3 weeks, I did this. A year ago, I was like this. 2 years ago, I was like this. You are telling yourself, what am I doing better? How can I get better? Now, that is you looking at your own trend and your report and making improvement, because you are recording. If there's another person, a supervisor, a customer, a client, anybody who looks at that report, what's going to happen is that you have another set of eyes seeing it, who are going to be drawing your attention to areas of improvement that you can work on. That makes it double. That's why it says if it is measured and reported, the rate of improvement will accelerate. Improvement is most likely to happen in an environment that promotes customer focus, clear goals, accountability, scorekeeping, frequent feedback, recognition of personal achievements, and celebration of victories. This is performance improvement individually, as a team. This is the kind of environment that can foster performance improvement. Customer focus, clear goals. You must set goals. You must have targets. In any industry, in any service industry you are in, you must have targets. Don't work without having things you are measuring or working towards. It's not a good life at all. And then accountability. If you are doing well, you take the praise. If you are not doing well, be accountable for it. Be able to take ownership of that result. And that's why scorekeeping is important. And then frequent feedback, because you can't wait until the end of the year. When appraiser comes, everybody starts being afraid of appraiser. If you've been giving frequent feedback and you've been measuring and you've been accountable on a week-to-week basis, appraiser just one any other day. Appraiser is not a big deal. But if you know that there's not been much and you're afraid, that you'll be afraid, of course, because recency factors and other things can come and influence your appraisal for good or for bad last minute, and you're done for. All right. So this is key to getting it right. So we say measure, measure, measure. What should you measure? Measure things that should stay going up when the expectation is that a particular measure or metric should be going up. Measure things that should be going down. There are certain metrics that should be going down. Measure and record and track things that should stay within a mean. There are certain measures that should stay flat. They shouldn't deviate. That is when we know you are improving. So if you take rework, for example, where should it be trending towards? Upwards or downwards? Downwards, of course. Customer complaint should be trending upwards or downwards? Downwards, of course. Commendations from customer, where should be trending towards? Upwards, right? And that's exactly what we're talking about. So you are actually keeping numbers and you are creating a graph of your performance based on these numbers. Take reduction in mean time between failures. Oh, this equipment fails very often, but you record when it fails. If you have a time when you record, it failed on May 12th, we fixed it. It failed again in September 11th. It failed again on December 1st, and so on. Did you record those? So if I want to know the mean time between failures, I'll take how many times it failed in a particular year, divide by that period of 1 year, and I get my MTBF, right? So if somebody says this equipment is better than the other one, or this building is better than the other building, I can use an MTBF as a way of measuring quality of those two facilities of management. So in essence, you must be measuring. And if you're measuring, whatever you're measuring must be valuable. Whatever you're measuring that is valuable must be trending upwards, desirably upward, desirably downwards, or staying within a particular mean. So there are factors that will influence FM quality improvements. As facility managers, you want to be in control. You want to be able to say, I will be improving, I will do better every day. But certain factors will affect your quality. If you are in the temperate environments right now as we speak, the hailstorm and the snow will make a big mess of your FM service. You know, people just understand they have to live with it. If you are in Nigeria, I'm sure many of you are going, into overdrive with the dust that's covering the whole landscape and inside your interior, except you have completely sealed up interior. Because of course, this is Harmattan. It's a dry wind and it comes with a lot of dust, right? And so on and so forth. So external factors will affect your quality. Weather and climate, natural disasters, floods, monsoons and earthquakes, political, economic, and social stability. When there's so much instability, coming back to the client to say things like costs have gone up, we cannot maintain your assets at the rates we were maintaining before because imported materials have gone up because of Forex. It's not a palatable discussion to have. Nobody wants to have increased costs, but then again, it becomes obvious, due to factors you cannot control. And then age and gender demographics of the people you are serving and of your own staff. Geographical considerations, elevation, closeness to water sources. There are so many things that would affect quality. Rural versus urban considerations, distance to suppliers, transportation infrastructure, and job demographics. These are all things that you may not have control over, but you have to deal with them. You have to find a way to plan around them to ensure that the kind of service you provide during rainy season is not the same service you provide during dry season, because you are responding to external factors that will make your facilities look worse in one season over another. And you must find a way to balance it by doing something different, because seasons are also changing. And then we have the internal factors, things that you and your owners have control over: the age of your building, how well the building has maintained over time, the condition of the facility, age, gender, and pay scales of employees, whether they are in unions. The building designs also have, their internal factors, impacts, employee work schedules, evidence of employee training, ratios for to frontline employees. There are so many factors that are within your reach, even though you may not have full control over them, but they're caused by you and your owner. It's an internal thing to deal with, right? So your ability to take these factors that influence FM quality not as excuses, but as factors that you understand, that you are creating your plans around, is why we are teaching this. A list of customizable FM quality improvement measurement tools. within the FM industry. There are all kinds of FM quality improvement tools. These are things that you can be measuring and tracking to show whether you're improving or you are not. Things that management will be concerned about, in the service you are delivering: cost per square foot, cost per labor hour, which tracks labor productivity, supply cost per square foot, percent of FM departmental budget to overall organizational budget, how much FM is taking as its own spending over and above, what the entire organization is spending in its overhead, and so many. Other factors that can come in here: number of kilowatt hours used per building, per time of day, per person, work orders processed by employee to check on whether they are being productive or not with their time that they're paying for anyway, and so on and so forth. This is just some of the ideas you can start tinkering with in creating measurement tools, things that you must measure. They must align with customer expectations. They must align with organizational goals. And when you're coming up with these measurement tools, the items and things you must measure and track, you must ensure that you revisit your strategic facility planning considerations, where you are looking at the big picture, why the organization has this corporate strategy and the alignment with strategic corporate strategic objectives. Because facility managers may not necessarily, in most cases, you are not in the forefront of demonstrating quality to your customers. You have staff that go ahead of you. You have contractor teams that go ahead of you. They are the ones people meet. They are the ones people see. You can't look all shiny in your space, in your office, and expect the customers to know that you are a high quality environment to work in, when your cleaners and technicians are also tattered and also illiterate, are also on coots when they are talking to customers, or they are socially not manageable. They fight and quarrel and shout in the site and things like that. Now, because you understand these complications, you need to find ways to work with your team members to ensure that they can reflect who you are. Because when somebody sees any of your shop floor, front level staff, they should see you immediately. You should be concerned that much. And to get them to be able to respect your customers, you need to respect them. To get them to be able to serve your customers with full focus, you need to understand them. You need to be able to blend with them. You need to be one team in reality. Treat your employees as they will want to be treated. I'm sure you must have all heard about the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated, right? But in the platinum rule, you're actually treating others as they will want to be treated, not as you will want to be treated. Because some of us want different things. We want to be treated in a different way from what others want to be treated. So don't use your own self-judgment of how you want to be treated to treat others. That means you must confer with people. You must understand them. Open communication, so that the standards are communicated. You cannot over-talk, you cannot over-speak, you cannot over-teach, you cannot over-inspire. Every effort put in doing any of these things will help create the kind of standards you want. Let your staff feel valued and feel that they're an important part of your operations. Treat them with courtesy and respect. As individuals whom you can give praise and feedback. As individuals you can be open and direct with, yet respectful, should their work behaviors need correction. So in essence, all this simple overhype or over push, worship the employees, serve them, please them, make sure they're not getting angry, and then they kill their operations because they cannot balance that with when an employee is actually fumbling. You don't have a way of correcting that employee because you are feeling that you are obligated to be nice all the time. If you are nice all the time, your operation will crash. Respect means that you don't use insults, you don't use verbal abuse, you don't use physical assault, you don't use any of those demeaning. Of course, many of those things are even against the law, by the way. But you must be able to correct people The same person you corrected now can receive praise and positive feedback the next minute. That's how to be a manager and a leader. And then value people's feedback. If people talk and you don't appreciate that they have said something to you and you don't use it for anything meaningful, they will stop talking, they will stop giving you feedback. And once they stop giving you feedback, what's going to happen is that they will automatically, over time, begin to shut down their brain. They will stop thinking and reasoning about things that concerns the organization. And once that happens, the day you are in a bind and you want them to give you advice, they'll give you a very shitty advice. They'll give you a rubbish advice that will frustrate you. In fact, you'll be shocked that they told you such things, right? But it will have come out of many months of shutting them down. And as such, they also shut their brains down. Give them a living wage. At least in our FM industry, we have this crisis of minimum wage compliance. So many organizations still pay below minimum wage. And we are in the industry where minimum wage greatly or mostly applies. All over the world, the FM industry is where minimum wage mostly applies. Whether it's per hour, per month, per year, whatever it is, minimum wage is minimum wage. But what does a living wage really mean? A living wage means that the job has been packaged in such a way that it is meaningful work for somebody to do. And the job package has been packaged in such a way that the pay that goes with it provides value to the person who is paying and provides a means of living to the person who is receiving it. If you miss any of the two, you have an issue. If you try to pay a wage that is meaningful to the person who is receiving it, and you're giving the person work that does not provide value, then you are killing the organization. If you provide a lot of work for people, the work is valuable and it is sizable, considerable, and the person is being paid a wage that is not meaningful, that cannot sustain well-being and livelihood, then you are killing the person. How do you create this balance? Package jobs that are meaningful and put a pay around it. As soon as people just sit around all day as a job, they just sit around all day as a job. They don't do anything else. Some sit waiting for calls to come to a phone, and whenever the call comes, they answer it, and that's their job. How much value is that job when you get 1 or 2 calls a day? How much should that person be paid? Now, if that person is packaged additional work, like having a computer to analyze data from all the sites, while waiting for that call, if site technicians bring in their reports, you are collating them into a spreadsheet, for example, or you are analyzing reports that were turned in from previous months and creating trends and analysis out of it. That becomes meaningful work, right? So if somebody pays you 20,000 below minimum wage, or even 30K for sitting down to answer a call, you may still say that you are not being paid enough, that 30K is not able to sustain you. And the person paying the 30K is also angry that the 30K is being wasted because you just pick 1 or 2 calls a day and we can't see value in the work that you do. So how do we package jobs to ensure that we give a minimum wage? Many of us in FM, we will see cleaners that we dump all over the place. These cleaners come in by 6, by 8, they are done. But you leave them all there to loiter over the whole place and chit chat and play on their phones till evening. And then they feel that they have done 8-10 hours of work, whereas you only give them 2 hours of work. Why don't you just allow 8 of them to go and let the other 2 do the little maintenance activity that will happen during the day, and then another 2 the next day, another 2 the next day. At least if you are paying them minimum wage for such a job, or even below minimum wage, you know it's a part-time work. They can also find other things. They can also do other trading. Idea is, do not give people meaningless work and pay them meaningless monies, because they will become biles, angry people around your spaces. Give people the tools to work. The tools and resources is very critical. Sometimes we employ people and we don't remember to actually give them the right tools to do the job. We still pay salaries, though. Salaries will be paid. Somebody will say, oh, I don't have a laptop to work. You'll be paying salary every month, but you can't buy the laptop. Somebody will say, I don't have a set of tools. You pay salary every month and you don't have money to buy the tools. It's so foolish. So think about it. Give them the tools. Give them the right templates, the right documentation to provide good results, okay? Those are some of the things you can do. Just ensure that staff are productive, so you can compensate them well, so you can appraise them well, so you can reward them well, and then they'll become happy at the end of this. You win, they win. And if you follow these guidelines, you're going to have a more engaged workforce. You're going to have greater feedback from your employees. You're going to have increased ideas for workplace improvement. They will tell you how smart they are when they start coming up with ideas. There'll be less absenteeism from the workplace. People will love to come to work because they miss the work, they miss the people they serve, they miss their colleagues, they miss you. Okay? Fewer interpersonal conflicts. They will not be fighting in the workplace. Less staff turnover. People will not be running off every minute. Less hiring and firing. Greater staff productivity. Reduced costs due to sick time and other missed work. And this is very important. If people take excuse that, oh, they are sick, you can go and kill them. They have allowance to be sick for a few days. But if that becomes something they do deliberately to stay away from work, then there's a problem. And then your workers will be happier and there'll be less accidents. Think about that again. People who feel valued and are doing valuable work and are doing quality work will have less accidents. Sounds like accidents are created by people, right? Yes, if people become non-committal, if they become absent-minded, there'll be more accidents. That's the whole idea. More promotions and employees wanting to learn new skills. Training, very key to maintaining a quality workforce. You must train people. 4-point training method of plan, do, check, act. It's a time-proven and employee-tested means of providing proper training. The first step, you review the job requirements and objectives with the new employee, including required job documentation and then demonstration of how the job is done. So what this simply means is you start with the job, not the employee. Analyze what needs to be done on the job, what needs to be achieved. Step 2, the employee actually does the job and just the way they have been showed. Step 3, the employer follows up and checks employees' work. Constructive feedback, we say continuous feedback is very important, right? Is given, and then any additional training that will be required. And then there's a 4th step where you establish the gap between the expectation and what the employee is actually doing. And then you can provide training to close that gap. Service levels are documentation that we put together to define our understanding of customers' expectations. So typically what FMs will do is to have a service level agreement with the vendor. And in most cases, ask the vendor to go and bring his own service level agreement, as if the vendor is the one prescribing what you want out of the service. That's an upside down approach. Your service level starts from you understanding your customers, your users, documenting their requirements. And because you understand and document their requirements, you can now create a scope of work, create a specification, and then put levels of service in place. It is that documentation you will now carry over to your vendors and say, this is what my customers want. These are the service levels we expect, specification and scope of work we want. Price how much you will deliver on this service. So it actually starts from internal and moves to external, not the other way around. The service level agreement is a fiscal document that is legally binding service agreement between the FM department and the user of the service, consisting of such business topics as safety, quality, staffing, etc., and so on and so forth. And you transfer that documentation or that information into your agreements with vendors or contractors. Your service levels could be, your service level agreement could be prescriptive. In prescriptive agreements, you are creating step by step what the supplier or service provider would do. Which means for cleaning, for example, you are saying things like provide 2 cleaners, give them this and that for PPEs, give them these tools, give them these chemicals precisely, mix it this way, clean this at this time and do it at this frequency. You're prescribing everything. You take all the risk because you are telling the vendor or the supplier exactly what to do. Now, mind you, your building users will not be able to be prescriptive with you. It is in your bid to be the professional that you can create prescriptive specification to your service providers because you understand exactly what your building users want, right? Now, but you could also do a performance-based approach. A performance-based approach is where you have the expectations have been spelled out, and you now tie those expectations to incentives and penalties. You don't necessarily prescribe exactly how each one will perform, but you tie the expectations into penalties and incentives. Now, the output-based approach is similar to performance-based because you are not even looking at any inputs. You don't care whether it's soap that is easy to clean. You don't care whether they're bringing human beings or robots. You don't really care about anything. You basically just tell them, this is what I want. I have a glass 200 square meters. I have floor that are terrazzo 500 square meters. I have toilet bowls that are 50. I have curtain window blinds that are 500 square meters and so on and so forth. You just tell them exactly what you want. And for each of those items, you prescribe. For this one, no dust. For this one, no stains, no smudges, no smears, no cobwebs. For this, no. The customer can, they understand. All right, I'm going to take a quick minute break, and I'll be right back. One critical aspect of quality improvement is benchmarking. Benchmarking entails finding out what other people are practicing that are better than, that are giving better results than you are achieving, and finding ways to use that information to check yourself. Because you are doing quality improvements, you are measuring, you are tracking, you may be making progress, you may not be making so much progress according to your own assessment. But until you know what is happening elsewhere, you will not be able to know whether what you are doing is actually making sense or not. Right? So if you know what others are doing that is good, you can now say, I'm doing good or I'm not. And this is a simple benchmarking methodology, which starts by you identifying key performance indicators. Before you can decide whether what you are doing is even good or not good or making sense, or you must check it against alignment, strategic alignment with your corporate objectives. So that's where it starts from. You measure performance of your own facility operations, and then you begin to compare your own performance with best in class out there. That is how you begin to track and determine things that you need to improve and start working on them. And then we talk about quality measurements, tools for quality measurements. For you to be able to take in any kind of quality measurement, you must have quality control tools. These are tools that you use to analyze data, because quality is all about data. You set all of the metrics and standards using data, using objective measures, and you track them, and you create analysis, whether it's flow charts, whether it's cause and effect diagram, Pareto charts, check sheets, scatter diagram, control charts, and histogram, and so many of the tools that we analyze in this lesson. I'm going to give you an assignment. I'm not sure I've given you any assignment before now in this class. I don't know if any other facilitator has given you an assignment. We are going to go through each of the quality control tools. I'm going to show you one after the other, and you are going to give me at least one instance where you can use it in your FM operations. Let's start with the first one. I will explain it, and then you develop one instance where you can use it in your FM operations. Histogram. Histogram is a statistical tool for measuring frequencies, right? So, and what are frequencies? You're measuring two measures, and you're trying to compare them, and you're trying to determine how often a particular occurrence take place amongst the things you are measuring, okay? If I'm taking this example of demographics, people in my community or my workforce, what are the average age, or what is the age range of my workforce? Instead of having 200 workers and using and writing all their ages one by one, I'll create a group of ranges, right? And then I'll say those between this age and this age, how many are they? Okay, there are 4. Those between this age and this age, how many are they? There are 2, right? So what I'm doing with a histogram is to analyze a set of static data. I could also use this same histogram to analyze certain complaints that happens within certain days and certain periods of the day. For example, I probably will want to track how many complaints come from the parking lots, for example, in the morning between 8 and 9, between 9 and 10, between 10 and 11, right? Just creating a histogram can help me know when I can allow a staff to be off. Let's assume I have the highest complaints and issues in the parking lot between 10 and 12. And then I'm trying to create a roster for staff being around, right? I know that I have the biggest issue because I've done this analysis using a histogram. I can't just let everybody off between 10 and 12 and have only one person on ground. That's a recipe for failure. But if I don't have this analysis, I probably don't know exactly when the biggest number of complaints come. Okay, I'm just giving you that instance. You have to write your own as well. Next one. The check sheets. All right. The check sheet is like a tallying sheet where you are trying to track certain occurrences, similar to what we do in a histogram, but you can track so many variables at the same time, right? So in this particular example, there's a tracking of defects, the type of defects, and the numbers of defects, and this is being added up together. The count per defect type, or per item type, or per day, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, is being tracked using a check sheet. Root cause analysis. You want to find out what caused a major problem, or what caused a major success, right? For a major problem, you want to be able to nip in the bud the things that build up into that problem. And for a major success, you want to be able to enhance the things that build up into that success. So you ask why. Why did this happen? And then you ask why again. Why did each of these happen? And then you ask why again. Why did each of these sub whys happen? And then by the time you get to the 5th why, you now deal with issues at the base. Those are the ones that are your root cause. And then the flow chart. I talked about creating standards, creating process flows, and all that. You can use a flow chart to represent a procedure. Very simple. You can use it to create a decision matrix where people decide what to do because you've created a logic on a flow chart. A flow chart is a visual expression of a complex document, just to represent it in a way that anybody can relate with it. Cause and effects, similar to the root cause analysis, but the visual way of putting the root cause analysis again. And then you have the Pareto chart, which tracks and trends to help you group. It's almost like a histogram, but it helps you group all of the issues or items you are tracking into a frequency bar, so that you can know where to focus your efforts. We talk about 80% of your efforts giving you 20% of your results, and 20% of your results coming out of 80% of your efforts, and vice versa. What the Pareto chart does is similar to a histogram, but with this, you can just plot and know the one that will give you the highest challenge. That if you can solve that one problem, you would have solved, let's assume you have 8 issues that are common in your facility. Because you've not been tracking how many times each of these issues happen, and how they cause more complications for your occupants and residents, you probably don't know which ones you are doing well in. You probably are able to solve 6 of them, but the remaining 2 becomes such a huge nuisance that you still feel overwhelmed by them. But if you do a Pareto chart by doing a histogram and then using that to rank them, so instead of a histogram that can be up, down for different items, in a Pareto chart, you arrange them according to the sequence of their highest frequency. The highest on one end and the lowest on the other end. And then you have 8 items. Deal with the one that has the highest frequency, for example, you may have one, it's like using one stone to kill 10 birds, right? If I deal with this problem, I would have reduced all my complaints by 30% or by 40% by just dealing with this problem. It gives you visual access to just see what your real issues are. Because if you are dealing with the small ones and your problems are still many, then you are not able to solve any problem. Scatter diagram helps you to measure correlation. So you're probably tracking how many times people complain about dirty floors, for example, and you are tracking that against maybe rainy days. And then you are trying to create correlation between rainy days and the number of complaints from dirty floors when people come in with muddy feet, for example. That's one of the things that a scatter diagram can do. There are many other applications that you can apply it for. And then the control charts. We said things that you trend upwards, things that you trend downwards, and things that must stay within a mean. Things that will stay within a mean as you are tracking and recording them is a control chart that helps you determine what the lower specification limits and the upper specification limits should be, that these things must stay within. If it's going out of any of these limits, then you know that it's out of control. The control chart helps you to track things that must stay within a mean so that they don't go out of control. An example is your generator temperature. I'm giving you a free example. All of you have to put down one application different from what I've used in class. So key performance indicators is one of the things that we talked about as how you measure the criticality or relevance of your service to your organization or to your customer, right? These are the things that you can track and measure as your contribution because of the work. That's the case. You can be cleaning very well. And your cleaning is, if people are still getting sick, are still getting infected from or infections and still getting hygiene-related issues from that space, your cleaning is not making any impact. So basically, in essence, you're trying to measure how relevant your service is, how important or how critical it is to the top line value of that organization, which is your strategic objective. So things like profitability, operating expenditures, profitability should go up, operating expenditure should come down, customer satisfaction should go up, customer retention should go up, sustainability performance, and so on. These are things that are meaningful to the organization at the highest level. Some organizations are so sensitive to things like staff turnover because of the secrecy level, the confidentiality requirements, the clearance or security clearance requirements. So you don't want to be having such high turnover in such environment because of the kind of work that you bring them to come and do or get exposed to in the environment. And that will be used to track you as a service provider or as an FM. So we end with this Toyota's 14 quality management principles. This is like a summary of how we can apply those quality management principles that Deming put together, that Japanese have used for many years to become the industrial hub of the world. How do we apply some of these principles in the service industry? We'll start from the first one. Base your management decisions on the long-term philosophy, even at the expense of short-term goals. What this means is always think long-term. Don't prefer short-term solutions. Don't prefer shortcuts to solutions, to issues that you're having. Number two, create continuous process flow to bring problems to the surface. Avoid disjointed activities. So when we talk about standardization, when we talk about creating procedures, writing processes, and creating flowcharts, this is what helps to bring to the forefront what we should be doing so that we'll know whether we are doing well or not. Number three, use the pull system to avoid overproduction. Deliver to meet customer requirements. So in essence, do not use your own mind to create what the customer wants. First hear from the customer, understand, define, confirm before you go and implement. Number four, level out workload. Maintain a balanced workload across resource pools. You have technicians, electricians, cleaners, plumbers, and the rest. ensure that you are not overloading one and leaving the other without work. And you can do this by cross-training them. You can do this by multi-scaling them in such a way that you start moving them away from those silos of technicians of building ACs and building electrical and building plumbing and so on and so forth. So a technician that is a building technician that should be able to do everything. So even if somebody coming with one particular basic or primary skill, make sure that person can learn everything else, can fix door handles, can fix pumps, can fix sockets and switches, can repair fans and so on and so forth within the 6 months period, so that they can all become multi-skilled. Once they become multi-skilled, the workload begins to balance out. Does it make sense for the guy servicing the ACs to be struggling with compressor and water and buckets and everything, going on ladders, and the guy who is the electrical guy is sitting down and saying, I don't have work to do because that's AC work? What is difficult in holding ladders and carrying buckets and using compressors to wash outdoor units and so on and so forth that he cannot learn even within 15 minutes and be able to do it, right? So that's the way to balance resource workload across resource pool. Build a culture of stopping to fix problems, to get quality right the first time. This is very important. Do not allow something that is tending to fail actually fail before you agree that it is tending to fail. When it is tending to fail, stop it. The slightest deviation that is observed can become so wide over time if you allow it to fester. Standardized tasks, and we talked about this, foundations of continuous improvement and employee empowerment. Use visual control so no problems are hidden. This is effective reporting, flag out of control situations. And that's why this is one principle that made me to create a reporting system that is one document, one continuous flow for everybody in the team. You just keep reporting into the same task list, you keep reporting into the same planner tool, and you keep reporting into the same monthly report perpetually for as long as you stay in the mission, because we will not be allowed, we will not be having things to drop. We will not be allowing things to drop. We will not be allowing performance to drop, or any activity to get into a missing link, or something cannot be followed up with. Everything will be continuous on an ongoing basis. Reporting, if you're not reporting, you are not working. Use only reliable, thoroughly tested technology and supply chain partners that serve your people and processes. So in essence, bring in contractors and vendors that understand the highest level of strategy of your organization so that they can work as partners. Grow leaders who thoroughly understand the work that you do, they live the philosophy and teach it to others. If somebody is the only one that can do a particular task and does not want anybody else to know it, kick that person out as quickly as possible. Only people who can teach, only people who can be open to let others learn from them can become leaders. You cannot become a leader if you stay on as a specialist forever. Develop exceptional people and teams who follow your company's philosophy. Whatever your mantra, whatever your philosophy is, let people understand it and follow it. Otherwise, they will be saboteurs in the system on an ongoing basis. You don't want to have that. Respect your extended network of partners and suppliers by challenging them to do more. So this is where respect doesn't mean not pointing out people's faults or not getting them to become better. Challenge them to do more, right? But never be abusive. Okay, so that's where the respect come in. Go and see for yourself to thoroughly understand the situation. I talked about management by walking around. You can't sit in your office and expect everybody else to do right. It's not just going to work. You must go around, you must see for yourself, you must be part of what is happening in your organization. Your team must feel your presence, the customers must feel your presence. Make decisions slowly by consensus, thoroughly considering all options, and implement decisions rapidly. Get people involved in the decision-making process, even if you already made up your mind on what you want to do. Don't be so open about that this is exactly how I want it. You must make people able to be part of that decision-making process so they can analyze. And in many cases, if you're open-minded, you will change your mind when that discussion is taking place. But as soon as there's been a decision, move into action. Become a learning organization through relentless reflection and continuous improvement. This is the Japanese Hansei and Kaizen approach to continuous improvement. You must continuously learn. You must continuously learn. I spoke to one very large organization, the head of the FM, about skilling the staff, and he says, this is not a school. I feel so sad because such organizations will have people who are just there to drain the organization down. And the other one said, somebody else said, oh, well, we don't sponsor training anymore because once we pay for the training, as not they get a certificate, they leave us. I said, okay, so the reality for such an organization, again, is a stark one, because what's going to happen is that those who stay are the ones who don't even want to improve in the first place. They will not sponsor themselves, company will not sponsor them, and you will not fire them because they're not doing well. And they will not do well. So you lose every month you pay their salaries. Those who improve themselves will find the organization no longer suitable for them, and they will move to other organizations where continuous improvement is what they want, or the environment around them, and you will lose them eventually. So it's a lose-lose if you don't train or encourage people to learn. So that's our lesson for today. Let's hear your questions. If you have a question, please indicate by raising your hand, and then we will acknowledge and take your question. Am I seeing any hand up? Okay, that means we fully understood the class. We're all good to go. All right, so is there an assignment, is there an assessment in this class? I've given an assignment, so let me see if is there an assignment, assessment, Barakat, or anybody? There's an assessment, good. So there are two things you are going to work on for this class. You're working on the assessment and you're working on the assignment. The assignment is to give one practical operational application of those statistical tools. Right, please note it so you can add it to the WhatsApp group for them to see. Just give one operational application for each of those tools we talked about. Godwin, please ask your question.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Paul and everyone in class.
Good evening.
Please, I would like to ask your personal assignment given, which we are to give an example each on the tools.
Yes.
Are we going to have a form of visualization just like it's in the module, like which will be dealing with data that would give this representation, or we'll just give an example like the one diesel monitoring? We'll just name.
You will need to give an example. So diesel monitoring, you'll use some numbers, you'll use some data to represent how that tool will work for diesel monitoring.
Okay. That means we need to generate our own data for it.
Yes. You can use your own simulation. If you don't have real data on ground, you can use simulation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to be in class again with you on Friday. Okay. So have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Mr. Paul.